Oh,
Hi, Emma's still in the screen. Get out, the other Emma. Get out. We don't want you here. We are joined by the amazing Dr. Zoë Harcombe, who is one of the UK's leading gurus in public health nutrition, Ph.D. in it, specialising in evidence-based dietary advice, and that's probably a good place to kind of start into it, because this evidence-based, I don't think, I know a little bit, having a sports science degree in nutrition diet for the last 20 years, and some of the stuff I learned at uni 22 years ago has really frustrated me over the last 20 years, watching all like low-fat diets and all this stuff, when you go, well, the evidence isn't there to support any of that, so why is it still going on? So from on that base, just describe what's the evidence-based nutrition that you work on, where
okay.
compared to sort of the diets that get flung at us, the difference
Okay.
in it.
Yeah, good place to start, actually. So the most interesting thing about evidence-based is that the key is in the word base. So for something to be based in evidence, the evidence has to come first. And this is a point that I've been rowing over with Public Health England for quite a few years, because they basically made up a number of dietary guidelines, and then they've tried to retrospectively provide evidence for them, but that's not evidence-based. So my PhD was particularly about the introduction of the dietary fat guidelines. So the two guidelines that say, number one, thou shalt have no more than 30% of thou's calories per day in the form of fat. And number two, you shall have no more than 10% of your calories per day in the form of saturated fat, because of course, everyone knows fat is bad, saturated fat is even worse, lols. So those are the main dietary guidelines that were introduced. And I see those as the root of all evil, because when they came in 1977 in the US and 1983 in the UK, that's when we started to fear fat, and that's when the low fat diet came in, and we can get into why low fat is automatically high carb, the consequences of all of that in a second. But when those were introduced, my PhD basically went back to say, okay, what was the evidence for those two guidelines at the time they were introduced? And to cut a 3.5-year PhD into one sentence, there was absolutely no evidence base whatsoever. So those guidelines should not have been introduced. So I then wound forward to 2016, which was when I actually was awarded my PhD. So I was then saying, okay, let's look at the evidence around 2015. If we were re-looking at those guidelines today, would they be introduced today? I.e., they weren't evidence-based, but that was 40 years ago. We've come a long way since then. Is the evidence there now? And the second part of the PhD said, no, the evidence is not there now. We do not have evidence to say that we should have no more than 30% of our diet in the form of total fat, and that we should limit fat, saturated fat, to 10%. The evidence is not there. So we do not have the evidence base for that. When you realize that and you start looking at other government dietary messages, you realize there's no evidence base for any of them. In fact, I'd love somebody on the chat to come up with one and say, hey, I think this is evidence-based. There's no evidence base for drinking 8 glasses of water. There's no evidence base for 5 a day. 5 a day was actually coined by the fruit and veg industry. It's a marketing slogan. It's something to try to get people in the fruit and veg industry to get us eating more fruit and veg. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying it's got no evidence base. And you just go into all of these, the 3,500 calorie theory. If you cut back by 500 calories a day, you will lose 1 pound of fat over the coming week. Oh, no, you won't. I say at conferences, if that were true, okay, I'm about 110 pounds. If that were true, and I cut back by 1,000 calories a day, I should lose 2 pounds a week. So I would then lose 104 pounds over the next year, and I would weigh 6 pounds in a year's time. And of course, people start laughing, and I say, why are you laughing? Because that's what you're believing to be true every time you start a calorie controlled diet on a Monday morning. So I've not found a single piece of nonsense that comes out of Public Health England or the American Dietary Guidelines or any other guidelines, Australia, New Zealand, that is actually based in evidence.
Sure, bollocks. on that, because we sort of not grow up, but everything, you look at everything and someone wanting to, if they don't know a lot about food, go on and look at the triangle of what to eat with the fat at the top and then the meat and all the fruit and veg at the bottom. What on the evidence base that you have that you're fighting and you're fighting against? What would your guidelines be?
Okay. Yeah, no, good question. So I go to it the other way around, and I ask the question, why do we need to eat? And yes, it's a nice thing to do. It's sociable and all the rest of it. But I mean, forget that. At the primary level, we need to eat because there are certain nutrients that we need to consume. The body doesn't make them. The body makes cholesterol, but it doesn't make retinol or, you know, other nutrients that we need. So there are basically 13 vitamins, the fat soluble vitamins, 4 of those, and then the 8 B vitamins, water soluble, and then vitamin C. So there are vitamins that we need, and there are minerals that we need, things that people know as calcium, zinc, iron, potassium, sodium, copper, manganese, etc., etc. So there are those things that we need, and then there are essential fats, which we call omega-3 and omega-6, and we need those nutrients in a particular form. So just to use the example of vitamin A, the body needs the vitamin A in the form of retinol. Retina, eye, think eye health, vitamin A. And retinol is found in animal foods and carotene is found in plant foods. So you quickly realize when you actually study nutrition, and children are not taught this at school, you have to study it for yourself when you're an adult. You soon realize that whenever there's a plant nutrient and an animal nutrient, the body always wants the animal nutrient. So you go to omega-3, for example, the body wants omega-3 in the form of DHA and EPA. It doesn't want it in the form of ALA, which is what you might get from flax seeds. So when vegans and vegetarians are saying, oh, I can get my omega-3s from flax seeds, no, you can't, not in the form that the body wants. And then you're into, will the body convert? Will it optimally convert? Is it as good as the real thing? No, almost certainly not. So go to what do we actually need, and then look at food very, very objectively and say, I now know what I need. Where do I find those things that I need? And I've spent hours on a website called nutritiondata.com, which feeds off the United States Department of Agriculture All Foods database. So you'll put in an example red meat, just take a steak, you'll put in an egg, you'll put in whole milk, skimmed milk, broccoli, brown rice, legumes, lentils, whatever. Just put in a selection of foods. And I've got a fabulous spreadsheet where I've done exactly this. And then I'll look at the nutrients that we need and I'll compare all the foods per 100 grams. You can then compare them by 100 calories. It makes no difference whatsoever. What the data tell you are that the foods that we should be eating are meat, especially red and offal, fish, especially oily, dairy, especially full fat, eggs, the yolk being the most important bit, and green things. And essentially that's all you need to eat to get your nutrients. Now, if you then choose to eat some sort of healthy carbohydrates, whether it's brown rice or porridge oats or legumes or whatever, because you enjoy them and your stomach can tolerate them, then that's fine. But make sure you major on the things that you actually need for nutrition. So my dietary advice basically boils down to 3 things. Number 1, eat real food. So stop eating processed junk and things that come out of a packet in a factory. Number 2, choose that real food for the nutrients it provides. And that's the bit that we've just done. And then number 3, unless you are a cow or want to be the size of one, stop grazing, because we can't eat all day long and then expect we're going to look like Amanda Holden. You know, she will eat once or twice a day. And probably then not very much. But, you know, people are like, oh, I'm going to have breakfast and then I'm going to have a snack and then I'm going to have lunch and then I'm going to have a snack and then I'm going to have dinner and then I'm going to have something before bed. You're grazing. You're going to be in bad trouble if you do that. So those 3 things, that's my dietary advice.
Because there's a lot on the grazing stuff. There's a lot of diets and diet plans that want you to eat about 7 times a day. And you know what I mean? It's a meal and a snack, and it's a meal and a snack, and it's a diet bar, and then it's a shake, and I'm just like, what?
So when would you ever burn your own body fat? Okay, so the other thing on weight loss, because weight loss isn't about eating less and doing more. Weight loss isn't about a calorie deficit. Weight loss is about a physiological circumstance in which the body will say, okay, I now need to raid body fat stores. And you'll know this as an exercise physiologist or whatever, you'll know that there are certain circumstances in which the body can do that, let alone forget that it will. So first of all, if you've got easy energy available, which is basically carbohydrate that you've recently eaten, or stored carbohydrate, which is any carbohydrate that you've eaten in the last 24 hours, and the body stores it as glycogen. If you've got any of that available and the body needs some energy, it's just going to go and raid the storeroom. It's just going to go to the pantry and say, great, got some glycogen, on I go. Now, it did not need to break into body fat to do that. So the first thing you have to do to start losing weight is to get your carbohydrate stores, your glycogen stores, low enough that the body is then forced to start looking around to say, oh, do you know what? I got no glycogen. Yes, I'm going to have to go and get some fuel from somewhere else. Now, if you've then been eating dietary fat recently, the body will say, okay, I'll use the dietary fat. But let's say you don't graze the whole time. So you had breakfast at 6:30 this morning and it's 12:30 or whatever, and you haven't had anything for 6 hours. Depending on what you had for breakfast, you might be getting, and what you've been doing in the morning, maybe you went for a walk, maybe you've been using lots of brain power in your job. Brain uses loads of fuel. Don't think you have to run around. The brain will do great stuff for you. So let's say you've started using up what you've had at breakfast and the body says, okay, I'm now going to go look for some fuel. This person, me, is someone who eats relatively little carbohydrates. So I haven't got much in the pantry and I've used up the fat from what she ate at breakfast. So right now I need to go start looking for some fuel. So I'm going to break down a bit of body fat. Now, the reason I'm a constant weight and I'm not losing weight is that my body will break down a bit of body fat when it needs it, but then it will get body fat and other stuff going in later on in the day. So I'm staying in this sort of equilibrium, but it doesn't mean that my body isn't breaking down body fat and then storing body fat again on a cyclical process, probably all the way throughout the day. Now, if you're trying to lose weight, what you want to be doing is breaking down body fat, but then not replenishing it at the level that I am. You don't want to be a constant weight. You want to start chipping away. But to start losing weight, the first thing you've got to do is to stop having a pantry full of glycogen that the body can just go to whenever it wants. So when we tell people to graze, we also tend to tell them to graze on carbohydrates. So dietitians will say, oh, have cereal and a piece of fruit for breakfast, and then have a piece of fruit mid-morning, and that cereal bar thing that you mentioned, and lunch, have a pasta salad and a ready meal deal with a low-fat bag of crisps, and then another snack in the afternoon. And it's just carb, 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 carb. And the body just does not need that level of carbohydrate. In fact, the entire physiological need that we have for consumed carbohydrate, eating carbohydrate, is zero. Both you and I could eat not one single ounce of carbohydrate between now and the day we die, and nothing would happen. In fact, arguably, we might even be healthier for it. I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just trying to make the point that we tell people to eat the macronutrient that we least need, and that's just not helpful.
Well, that's the thing. It's and I've been watching, and kind of had friends who, play for like Harlequins and like big sports teams, and this was 20 years ago. I remember them going fully on like paleo and eating steaks and eggs for breakfast, and that's what the team. And you look at it and you go, these top teams are talking about the caveman diet, and so why then do we have all these nutritionists and dietitians and Public Health England and the government telling us something else? That's the complete opposite of actually like what you're saying, and what people will read in magazines.
Yeah, it goes back to what I did my PhD in, which is why to me that was the most important nutritional question to answer. There are only 3 things that we eat. And we call them the 3 macronutrients. So we know them as carbohydrate, fat, and protein. So if you imagine a little pie diagram, protein tends to be pretty constant in any natural diet. And I can give you evidence for that theoretically. I can give you evidence for that empirically. But it just does tend to be about 15% of a natural diet. You can look at the Pure Study. You can look at the Bible of Nutrition, Gordon and Wardlaw. It just is. So then you've got about 85% left in the pie chart. So the second you set a dietary requirement of no more than 30% of your diet in the form of fat, you can immediately see what you've done to the pie chart. You've said we've got 15 in protein, we've got 30 maximum in fat, there's 55% left. That has to be carbohydrate. Now, that's also why a low carbohydrate diet ends up being high fat. So a low carbohydrate diet, for the people who say, right, I'm diabetic or I'm pre-diabetic, and they decide that they want to cut their carbohydrate quite substantially, they might say, I only want 5 to 10% of my diet in the form of carbohydrate. Now, their protein intake will probably go up a little bit. It'll probably go up to about 20%. But then let's say that they're at 10% carbohydrate, 20% fat. There's still 20% protein. There's still 70% left, which then needs to be fat. So you can see the minute you go low fat, you automatically go high carb. The minute you go low carb, you automatically go high fat as a proportion of the rest of the diet. So the reason the dietitians are saying eat whole grains, eat fruit, eat potatoes, eat carbohydrates, starchy stuff is because they fear fat. Which is why I had to go back to say, were we right to fear fat? Now, what I went into my PhD with no preconceptions whatsoever. I guess if somebody had, I don't plan ahead, I just don't. I don't know what I'm having for tea tonight. So if someone had held a gun to my head and said, what do you think you're going to find? I would probably have said, I'm going to find evidence for the 30% fat, but it's going to have consequences. So we might have said, oh, you shouldn't have any more than 30% of fat. And that was in the name of heart disease. You know, I might find some evidence for that, but then I'm going to find that it was worse for, I don't know, obesity or diabetes or something like that. But the real shocker was that there was just no evidence for the thing that it was done in the name of, which was heart disease and overall mortality. There's just no evidence. You just don't die more if you've got more fat in your diet or more saturated fat in your diet. And when you think about it, that just makes complete sense. Because what have we evolved to eat over, you know, we didn't have the supermarkets that we've got now, even 100 years ago, even 50 years ago. You know, post-war, you did not walk into a supermarket and have 80% of the grocery store food that you wouldn't even recognize. You have to actually read the label to understand what the hell it even is. This is so new, that the way that we eat. What we evolved to eat was anything we could catch and kill and anything we could gather. So we evolved to eat animals and any of their byproducts that we can consume and anything that we would find in the natural environment. And then when fire came along, which I think was about 350,000 years ago, happy to be corrected on that, then we started being able to eat things that were not edible prior to that. We couldn't eat things like tubers, but when we could heat them up, then they became more digestible. And that's what we've evolved to eat. We haven't evolved to eat muesli and cereal bars and low-fat, high-sugar yogurts and, you know, fruit gums and whatever the hell else has got no fat and high sugar and no nutrients whatsoever.
I know that's the fact, isn't it? Because also it's sort of, when you look at what people did, you look at them, you know, the huge obesity issue we've got in this country, and think, well, 100 years ago they were eating full fat butter and full milk and animals, and you know, we didn't have it then. So why, we know what's causing it, so why then are we kind of, why is it all those foods causing it being advocated? Like, I remember living with someone, who's a great friend of mine, but she moved in, city girl, and she'd never cooked before in her life, and it was microwave meals every single night, and she was like, well, they're low fat. And I'm like, completely within a few months, actually completely re-educated her and got on the meat and the cheese and the high fat, high protein, and she'd lost weight so fast. But that was it. She was like, well, it's low fat diet meals, just that assumption that was gonna, you know, make her lose weight. And it's sort of everywhere, isn't it? On that. And I love my butter.
Okay, so that was the $2 million question there. The $2 million question there was why, and that's also something that I can claim credit to. So I've been a long-term opponent of what I call the eat badly plate. They call it the eat well plate. I mean, it has had various iterations. So it was the balance of good health plate back in 1994, and then it became the eat well plate or something in 2007, I think it was, and then it was updated in 2016 to call it the eat well guide. It's still the eat badly guide to me. So my claim to fame on that one is that I uncovered the conflicts of interest behind the update that was done in March 2016. So Public Health England appointed a panel who put together that role model guide to healthy eating. And I forget, I mean, it's on my website. If you put in Eat Well, I did actually call it Eat Well, not Eat Badly. If you put it in on my website, you can see that the panel that was put together mainly comprised representatives from the fake food industry. So you had representatives from the Institute of Grocery Distribution, the Food and Drink Federation, the Association for Convenience Stores, which is your corner shops. I mean, they only ever sell junk. The British Nutrition Foundation, don't be fooled by the name. That's basically also the who's who of the fake food industry. It was just a confederation of fake food representatives. So what do they want us eating? The exact opposite of what I've just said, which is stuff that comes from farmers and fields, which basically has no margin. There's not a lot of margin on a steak or an oily fish or a piece of broccoli. Oh, I'm just checking the cat can get out of the, oh, bless him, he's trying to open the, oh, love him. Can you get out? Hang on a sec. I can't let the cat out. Hang on a sec.
Let the cat out. Let the cat out. While she's gone, if anyone has any questions, then fire.
Sorry about that.
I said that, telling everyone to fire through any questions.
Prove this is. Prove this is live. I have to go and let the cat out of the office. I'd locked him in so that I didn't get disturbed by noise going on downstairs. So where do we get to? Yes, so it's basically reps of the fake food industry. So what do they want us eating? They want us eating their sugary cereals and their sugary low-fat yogurts and their sugary cereal bars and their pasta salad and their ready meals and those low-fat meals that your friend was eating on a daily basis. That's what they want us eating. And the crime to me, I don't blame them. That's their job. Their job is to maximize returns to shareholders, basically, and to be a good employer. That's about it. I don't blame them at all. I blame Public Health England, but for putting those guys together and saying, hey, off you go. You're allowed to design the role model healthy eating guide for the UK that then gets mandated in schools and prisons and hospitals. It becomes the ingrained UK diet. And then you get poor mums who try to put cheese and whole hard-boiled eggs and carrot batons and whatever into their child's lunchbox. And then the school comes back, and this happened to friends of mine, the school writes back a little note saying, oh, where were the carbs? Where were the grains? Where were your healthy whole grains? Because it's a nationally mandated disaster. And why? Because it's about big money. It's not about our health.
It is that educated, because most people think you can have a bowl of bran flakes and a banana. That's a healthy breakfast, chopped up, and you don't realise the sugar content in a banana, which is off the chart. You might as well eat a tube of fruit gums, to be honest. Yeah. And if you look at bran flakes, they pack in all the extra sugar. Is that so? On like my thing has always been sugar. I just think it's the devil and just should be out. On that front, on the sugar front, what are your views on that and the work you're doing?
I completely agree with you. I mean, sugar, if you give up one thing, give up sugar. If you want to give up two things, then give up sugar and flour, because they are the root of all evil to me, and they actually comprise the major part of the UK diet. So when I wrote a book on obesity before I did my PhD, this is back in 2009, I actually looked at the data for how much, if you broke down the UK diet, actually how much of it came down to sugar and flour. And it was about 1,100 out of 2,000 calories per day. It was 55% of our diet. And then I actually just worked out if you could replace just those 1,100 calories with 1,100 nutritious calories with things like offal and red meat and oily fish and broccoli and other things, what a difference it could make to the nation's health. So absolutely, I mean, my sugar intake comes only from one source as a general rule, and that's dark chocolate. So I eat dark chocolate every single day. It will be a minimum of 85% cocoa, which means there's barely 10 per 100 grams left to put sugar in. I used to have a 100-gram bar a day when I was doing my study, and I don't eat that much now. I don't need it to fuel my brain. But that would be the most that I would ever eat on a daily basis. I'm probably down at a couple of grams of sugar a day, and the average person is at something like 130 to 150. It's obscene. No nutrients whatsoever.
I know I gave up. I pretty much gave up sugar 2 years ago. I was trying to get. I had a stubborn, like, after 3 kids in 6 years, these stubborn 6 kilos that just clinging to my arse, and I was like, right, enough. And went full protein and fat, which I love, and green veg, and my little vice are grenade bars, the protein bars, because they're really sweet, but they're probably full of crap that you really shouldn't eat, but they haven't got any sugar in, or carbs. So they're my little vice, and a glass of wine every night. But someone's asked, and the other, enough about me. Someone's asked, should you get rid of all flours or just gluten flours? Because obviously you've got this massive kind of gluten-free thing going on, which and now it has entire aisles in supermarkets of gluten-free products, which is another thing that people go, if I just buy all of that, and there's everything now, from cookies, chocolate bars, cereals, everything that's gluten-free, that's healthy and that's going to make you lose weight. So what's sort of the evidence on anything on the gluten-free?
Again, going back to the approach that I've got, which is the starting point of why do you eat, the gluten-free products have no place in the answer to that question. So if I'm eating to get the vitamins and minerals and choline and essential fats and all the other things that I need, they're not found in gluten-free products. They're just not. So you keep going back to the red meat and offal, oily fish, eggs, dairy, green things. If you're then not trying to lose weight, and if you want to enjoy some other products, and that works for you, then that's fine. But make sure you get the staples first. Make sure you get what you need. And then if you've got the luxury of being able to have some other things on top, then go for it. But I got some sourdough gluten-free or something. Somebody asked me to try something recently as a question in the club and a taste test. So I did it and got some gluten-free sourdough or something. And I used to like a loaf of bread. I mean, I actually haven't eaten bread for, this century. I don't know when I last ate it. But I thought, I'll try this thing just because someone's asked. It was disgusting. It didn't taste of anything. It just didn't. It was like eating cardboard. So I thought, okay, I've done the taste test. The rest is now going in the bin. It was just disgusting.
Why would taste, isn't it? It's that eating something because you think you're being healthy eating it, like diet bars and stuff. And actually, it all tastes like crap. It's like so many of these cereal bars or diet bars or gluten-free bars or gluten-free biscuits. It's more psychological, isn't it? That this is good for me, so I'm going to eat it instead. But then if you really, one thing that's helped me out, because eating issues all through teens and stuff, was actually tasting food, of actually making a conscious effort to taste the food, slow down, taste it, and actually go, do I actually like the taste of this?
Yeah. So I love the taste of carbs. So carbs that I would eat, if things didn't have an impact on weight and health, I would just eat carbs all day long. But the sad fact is that the nutrients are found in fat and protein and not found in carbs. But carb meals that I love are decent porridge oats with full fat milk, baked potato with cheese and or butter, brown rice with a curry or something like that. Brown rice and
naan bread.
Good old prawn curry or something. I would love those kind of things, but I'm not going to go and have a plastic sourdough or something, or something that's got more ingredients than I need. So I do eat carbs, and I do enjoy them. And as I say, if they made no difference to weight or health, I would just eat them all day long. I would never choose oily fish over Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Never. Honest. Brownies honour. I just wouldn't. I would eat crap all day long. I would eat Quality Street. I would eat crisps. I would eat Viennetta. Trying to think of what my binge foods used to be. I'd eat medjool dates. I'd eat all of that all day long if I didn't get fat and sick, but I would get fat and sick. So I have to say, hang on a sec, you're a grown-up, stop being a twat and stop eating all the rubbish.
But do you find, because I've found doing it, it's really hard. It's probably like giving up anything. Sugar is a drug. And so I say it is a drug. It's as addictive as smoking or any other drug out there. And you have to go cold turkey. And actually now I've found like the first 3 weeks, the headaches and kind of, oh my God, I need to eat. All I could think about was eating more sugar. But I did it and I stuck it out. But after 3 weeks, I thought, I don't want it anymore. And actually the odd bit of birthday cake or something is so sugary that I can only have a couple of mouthfuls. So
Yeah.
I would say to people, you've got to push through. You've really got to stand your ground on it.
Yeah.
And get through those first couple of weeks, because you're getting a drug out your system.
Yeah, it was much longer ago for me. I mean, I must have given up sugar, crikey, at least 20 years ago. As I say, I have a few grams now, and I will have a croissant now, or if I'm at a posh dinner and there's a nice dessert or whatever, I'll eat it. I don't think it's like smoking. If you have one, you want to go back to being a smoker. I think when you've had as long as I have without really eating it in any quantity on a daily basis, you can have a little bit, and it's not a problem. But I do remember at the time a couple of things. So I remember physically exactly what you've said. I got the headaches, I got the withdrawal symptoms, I felt miserable, I felt deprived, I felt, poor me, why can't I have sugar? How come other people can eat sugar and I just don't seem to be able to eat it in moderation? But then the other aspect that people don't realize is when you've got an addiction like that, you need to understand the role that the addiction is playing in your life. And the addiction is a prop. And it's the most common prop, a food addiction, because right from the year dot, anything bad happened and we were given food. And you fall over, you get a sweet. You have a nice event, you get an ice cream. Halloween, you get treats. Christmas, you get treats. Birthday, Easter. The fake food industry make it absolutely guaranteed that you get to the age of 5, let alone 18, knowing that treats make you happy, make you feel good, cheer you up, anything's going wrong, just have some junk food and everything will be okay. And that's my single biggest bugbear, because when I've been trying to work with adults, trying to help them to lose weight, and you've got a 50-year-old female who her boss is mean to her, and the first thing she thinks about is cake or biscuits, and her children are playing up or having teenage strops or whatever, and she thinks of cakes and biscuits. And it's just that absolutely ingrained Pavlovian response of, I feel low, junk is going to cheer me up. And I want to kind of escape the world. So it's really alcohol-like to a carbaholic. So you would get to the point of having a binge that you could actually shut the world out, because you were so in such a sugar high and in such a sort of frenzy of getting all these carbohydrates into you, and goodness knows what on earth is happening to your blood sugar. You are not actually functioning as a human being right at that moment. I don't actually think you should be allowed to drive or things like that. But what happens when you come off all of that is you take away the prop as well. And then you have to try to work with people who are trying to do that, to say, you are going to go through raw emotions and you are going to have to deal with them in a way that you should have learned to deal with them when you were 3 years old, but you didn't. Your parents just blotted them out for you for 15 years and didn't give you those coping mechanisms. You're actually going to now need to learn those coping mechanisms at the age of 50 or 30, whatever age you are when you give up sugar. And you are going to have something that makes you feel bad, like your boss being mean or your kids playing up, and you're going to have to deal with it without turning to sugar. And what a lot of people do is to try to turn to a different addiction. So they might switch from sugar to alcohol. A lot of people actually switch from sugar to exercise. So instead of stuffing their face with carbs, they'll go out for a run or they'll over-exercise. But to me, anything in excess and anything when you're using it for a reason other than to advance your health, you need to look at what you're doing and ask yourself, have you just replaced one coping mechanism with another? And have you actually got to the bottom of good coping mechanisms, so that and something nasty happens, you get abuse online or whatever, you don't reach for a glass of wine, you have the coping mechanisms to deal with it, to say, okay, there's abuse happening, I don't know those people, I don't care what they think, because I don't value those people, only care about the people whose opinions you care about. I don't care about them, so I don't care about their opinions of me. There you go, dealt with it, moved on, didn't need a bucket of sugar. But that takes a long time to get to for a lot of people, because we should have learned it much younger than we do. We just blot it out from such a young age.
Because do you think, and so someone's mentioned it now, like that, and we were talking about it before it went live, that this talk is very apt timing with the news out this morning of the massive part that obesity has played in the hospitalization when it comes to COVID and the deaths involved. I mean, huge percentage and sort of we've now got Asia saying, well, that's why UK and USA, the deaths are so high, because of our lifestyles and diet. And what's out today about GPs prescribing diets now, which on paper sounds great, but what do you think they should be doing? Because that's very easy to kind of band-aid and prescribe the diet. But if they're going to do get out and exercise and low-fat diet, then that's not going to solve the obesity issue.
Yeah, sorry, my chuckle was just that I saw someone loves Viennetta as much as I do in the comments section. So I didn't mean to inappropriately chuckle at that point. This is a really serious issue. And about this time last year, we became aware of the association between certain characteristics and bad outcomes with COVID. So we had evidence that had come out of China, limited, and we had some evidence that had come out of Italy. And we were discovering some surprising things. So smoking, for example, didn't appear to be a risk factor. And that started people thinking, do you know what? This actually seems to be a bit less of a respiratory disease and a bit more of a metabolic disease, because what we are seeing is a strong association of obesity levels, particularly very high BMIs higher than 40, and having a bad outcome with COVID. So I remember looking at particularly the New York data about spring of last year, and they'd done some fabulous research across a number of different medical centres where they basically said, right, everyone who's presenting at a medical centre who then had a lab test confirmed COVID, I know they can be a bit unreliable, but whatever, go with it. They had a lab test for COVID. What they then looked at was their BMI on entry, on presentation to the clinic, and what then happened as an outcome. And there were associations, there were risk ratios of up to 6 times the difference. That if you had a BMI over 40, your chance of the bad outcomes, and the bad outcomes is basically hospitalization. So from just walking into the clinic, you get hospitalized. Ventilation, which is you're in hospital and then you put on a ventilator, and then death. So those are your 3 bad outcomes in order. And it was an up to 6 times difference of the highest obesity levels, BMI north of 40, and the bad outcomes from those 3. It was striking. I mean, normally they'll say, oh, red meat causes cancer, and it's about a 7% difference. That's 1.07. This is 6-fold difference that we were seeing. It was astonishing. And it basically said from this time last year, the message could not have been louder or clearer. Now is really not a good time to have a high BMI. Now, I know as well as anyone, and you know as well as anyone, it is not easy to lose weight and keep it off. We are making no judgments here. We are not saying you've had a year, you should be 100 pounds down, because we know that the calorie theory doesn't work. Eating less, doing more doesn't work. If you've not been given the right advice, it doesn't work. We know that fake food is addictive. We know how powerful sugar is. We have all the sympathies between us here on this call to be making no judgments whatsoever. But we have known for a year that right now you really do not want to have a high BMI. So I like to think if I'd have had a high BMI a year ago, I would have been doing my own research, and I would have been saying, I don't know how many times I went on an eat less, do more diet, and I lost some weight, and then I regained it and a bit more, and then I lost some weight and I regained it and a bit more, and I ended up heavier than when I first started the eat less, do more diet, which is why I got to my point in my 20s where I said, look, this isn't working. What is going to work instead? And most people are actually working this out for themselves, or they hear a podcast like this, or they go to a conference, or they see a video online, or they follow someone on Twitter who looks how they want to look, and they realize that that person all the time is talking about the fact that they don't eat unlimited carbohydrates. So, there are ways of working out what needs to be done. And I would just be trying to encourage people right now to say, you just really don't want to have a high BMI right now. The current advice is not evidence-based. It's not good. It's not going to help you. Work out what you can do, what you can stick to, what's going to work for you, and then just do it. Just don't look back. Just do it. Just find the motivation somehow. Pain is a much better motivator than gain. This is not about looking good for your son's wedding or your graduation. This is about life and death. So whatever it takes right now, just find a way to do it.
And as you said, it's been a year. Does it frustrate you that it's now hitting the front pages on the obesity thing when it's been there for a year already? The evidence has been there.
Yeah, I think we failed people. I really think we failed people. It's like the vitamin D thing. The question they seem to be asking is, why should you be taking vitamin D? The question that I ask is, why would you not take vitamin D? Why would you not? Especially when they locked us up in our homes all over the last summer. And, anyone who went down to the beach to get some vitamin D was called a COVID-idiot. I mean, you couldn't make it up. It's like telling you that there's some deadly virus out and then not telling people. So it's like discovering COVID and then not telling anyone. Discovering that you're going to have a bad outcome if you've got low vitamin D levels, insufficient vitamin D levels, or a BMI over 30 and definitely a BMI over 40. Not telling people that, in my view, is negligent, because you could have given them incredibly important, powerful information that they could easily have taken into their own hands and done something about. And yet, for some reason, we didn't bother. We just said there's a virus. We didn't say you can do some really important, some simple, take vitamin D, some not so simple, lose weight and keep it off. But you could have done some things that would make a really big difference to you.
Yeah, that's what I think. They've had an own goal for a year, basically, an open goal we had an obesity issue before COVID hit, to actually educate. And but they kind of did by shutting everyone in, it kind of encourages everyone the amount of people I know that are drinking more alcohol. They've put on people who are healthy and gym body. The gyms are shut. Everything's shut. They've all piled on. I know I've got friends who've put on like 2-3 stone over the last year from it. It just seems to have the complete opposite of what could have been done. Lock everyone in, but give everyone the tools that whilst locked in to educate themselves.
Well, I mean, what a great time it would be, because you're not walking past the coffee shop. You haven't got the sandwich trolley arriving at work. You don't go out shopping as much because, one, you're told not to, and two, it just became a really unpleasant experience going out shopping. We've got a lovely little story. I saw my dentist back in November, and she wasn't particularly large at all. I don't know what her BMI might have been, but I think it would probably have been somewhere between about 25 and 30. I don't think it was in the dangerous category, but I saw her in November, and I sort of walked into the room and went, "Wow, don't you look great?" And she said, "Oh, thank you. I'm feeling great. I've really taken the time while I've been, because the dentists were pretty much shut away from being available to us." She said, "Oh, I've really taken the time to get fit and get out there and eat healthily and get the whole family eating healthily." And her skin was fabulous, and she just looked amazing. And she just like, right, I just took it upon myself. And she actually used the phrase, "I just realized it was really not a good time to not be in tip-top health. And therefore I wanted to be in tip-top health." And I thought, good on you, brilliant. What a great way to use lockdown, kind of thing. But as you've said, that hasn't been the typical response. The typical response has been, this is traumatic, it's distressing, it's unparalleled, it's unprecedented, it's stuff that we just cannot process as humans, to be denied all our freedoms, everything changed, everything taken away in such a short period of time. And most people that I know have gone the other way, which is, do you know what I need right now is something that makes me feel good, and that's red wine and sugar. And that's what they've done.
Yeah, but someone said, and this is the argument, isn't it? This is eating as nature intended, and there will be people that argue, well, if we're eating as nature intended, then animals shouldn't be included in that mix. So, what's your view? Yeah, what's your views on that argument? Because there is a sort of, why is nature intended in eating animals, which you and me are very pro eating that, but how does that sort of then fit the whole, well, we're not meant to eat them?
Well, we are, and I probably should have a declaration here that I was vegetarian for 20 years. So I didn't want to eat animals. I still don't want to eat animals. You know, the cat that wandered out is he's right up there.
Don't eat your cat.
Don't eat the cat. No, he's up there with husband, as in, loves of my life, and my dear dog, who passed away a couple of years ago. I adore animals. I do not want to eat animals. I would much rather live in a world where we don't eat animals. But the sad facts of nutrition are that the nutrients that we need are found in the form that we need them in animals. And you actually cannot get everything you need in a plant-based diet. You cannot get retinol. You're relying on the fact that you'll convert carotene to retinol, and not everybody can do that. You don't get B12, period. You just don't get it. Choline is very difficult to get in a plant-based diet. You don't get heme iron, which is the form of iron that the body needs. You don't get D3, which is the form that the body needs. Yes, you can get it from the sunshine, but you can't get it from the sunshine in the UK for at least 8 months of the year in the quantity that we need. What else can't you get? We mentioned the EPA and DHA earlier on. There are so many nutrients that you can't get if you don't eat animals. So essentially, we would not have been able to even try to be vegan had the supplement industry not been invented. And of course, eating as nature intended, the supplement industry was not here 100 years ago. So when children didn't get the right food in the Victorian era, and they were climbing chimneys and they didn't get exposed to sunlight, they got rickets, which is vitamin D deficiency. Now, I remember seeing articles in the newspaper just a few years ago saying rickets is returning because children are being told to stay away from the sun. If you go out in the sun, then put on slip, slap, slop or whatever, put on a hat, put on a t-shirt, cover any naked parts with cream. Don't eat eggs because you fear fat. Don't eat red meat.
Yeah. The egg argument came back again, didn't it? A couple in the last month or so about not eating eggs. I'm like, oh, please, not again.
Yeah. I've got 3 studies. I mean, I dissect a study every Monday. That's basically my business model. It's what I do. People pay not even £1 a week or whatever for a Monday newsletter. And I take the latest diet and health study, eggs cause diabetes or whatever, and I just tear it apart. And I've been doing it for 10 years. I've got 3 on my worktop at the moment of, which one am I going to do next Monday? And there's one saying eggs are going to kill you. There's another one saying, I don't know, eggs are going to give you diabetes or something. Eggs are going to give you heart disease. Oh, where do you come up with this complete and utter nonsense from? Is it more like cardiovascular disease is a modern illness? Okay, we didn't even really register it until about the 1940s. Which is more likely, that it's caused by the foods that we've been eating since man first walked upright, which is animals and things that we could scavenge, or the crap that you can get in the aisles in the supermarket? Which is more likely? Let me think. It's just nuts that the ancient foods are responsible for a modern illness. That's what Captain General Surgeon Peter Cleve famously said. The idea that a modern illness is caused by an ancient food is just quite the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life.
And caused by an egg, no.
All the nutrients.
Exactly.
Nature would have had to said, okay, right. And nature would have a really funny sense of humor, because nature would go, right, so humans need these nutrients to survive. I'm going to put them in the exact same foods that are going to kill them. There you go. There's a bit of a spoof. Okay. Take that, humans.
Which never killed the cavemen like thousands of years ago. When they went out with their spears. Those foods, that oily fish that they speared, now will kill you.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally, when you put it like that, it just sounds ridiculous, doesn't it?
It is. It's barking.
Cool. We're gonna just the last one someone asked earlier, and actually we haven't touched on about sugar and alcohol. What's your I can't ever stop my wine. I just have a little bit.
No, good. My hubby has wine every day. I'm all for get the basics, but have a treat. My treat is dark chocolate. Your treat is red wine. My hubby's treat is red wine. That's brilliant. This is not about abstinence. This is not about carnivore or fasting and all that kind of deprivation. I don't feel deprived. Alcohol is really interesting, because I don't think the carbohydrate content or the sugar content or the alcohol content has got very much to do with anything. Yes, I think if you're going to drink beer, you want to start worrying about sugar and carbohydrate content, because you're basically having liquid grains. if you're drinking beer. You're basically having flour and sugar in a big pint liquid form. So put that aside. We're talking about red wine. It's pretty low in carbohydrate. I think a typical glass of red wine is probably somewhere around 5 grams of carbohydrate, which is actually less than you're going to have in your green vegetables with your healthy meal that you have your glass of wine with. So that doesn't bother me. What is really interesting about alcohol for people who are trying to lose weight is that there's evidence that alcohol itself, alcohol also doesn't make you fat because your body can't metabolize it. So your body will just preferentially burn it. You don't store alcohol calories, so don't worry about those. A bit of biology there. But alcohol inhibits the operation of glucagon. Now, we've got these two hormones that are basically regulating your blood glucose levels. If your blood, and you've only ever got a teaspoon of glucose in your bloodstream at any one time, your entire bloodstream, you've got 1 teaspoon of glucose, 4 grams. So it goes above that, the body calls upon insulin to say, right, turn that into glucose, store it as glycogen, get it out of the bloodstream. If it starts going below that, which it quite often does at about 4 a.m. in the morning, the body will say, okay, glucagon, now you go and wake up, go and look for some stored carbohydrate, or if there isn't any, break down a bit of body fat, but get the glucose system back to the 4 grams because this person's going to be waking up in a couple of hours. So alcohol inhibits the operation of glucagon, we understand. So you have alcohol in the evening, and then at 4 a.m., when your body is trying to get glucagon to do its thing and to start getting your blood glucose levels back up to normal, it's impaired from doing that. So you might wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning after you've been drinking. You might find yourself a bit hungrier and crankier at breakfast. The other thing that happens is if you go out for the evening and you have a few drinks early on in the evening, and then you go out to the club or whatever, and you're still clubbing at about 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll find that the munchies kick in anywhere from sort of midnight, 11 p.m. onwards, because actually your blood glucose has been getting lower and lower and lower and lower during the evening to a fraction of a gram. And what you want is for your body to be saying, right, go and pop it back up again. But because you carry on drinking, you're impairing that process. And what happens when you've got low blood glucose levels is that the body says, go out and eat some glucose. So that's why the kebab fan only ever looks, and the chip fan, they only ever look attractive at about 1 o'clock in the morning. They actually don't look that attractive in nice, sunny, broad daylight, because your blood sugar levels are on the floor. So that's the harm that alcohol does. Is calories don't make you fat. I don't think you have to worry about the sugar and the carbohydrate, but you do have to worry about the fact that if you have, what we say in our diet club is if you have a drink or a few in the evening, you've basically shut off your chance of burning fat, body fat overnight that night. And that's okay. If you do that a couple of days a week and you're still losing weight and you're okay with that, that's great. But if you're doing it a couple of times a week or more and you're not losing weight, that's probably responsible for your weight stall.
Isn't it? And it's a sugary content, isn't it? Because a lot of people go, oh, I'll have I'll have a vodka and Diet Coke. It's that diet word, isn't it? Don't eat anything or drink anything that has the word diet or low fat in it.
It just perpetuates the taste for sweetness. You know, if I had a Diet Coke now, it would taste so sweet. I think it would just kind of wake up my brain and go, oh, Viennetta, fruit gums.
I haven't touched Coke since school chemistry, because I remember doing that experiment where you drop dirty coins and stuff in Coke and they clean it instantly. And I remember I can see the visual now of watching it going, that is never going in my mouth.
Exactly.
That's not right.
Yeah, I think what it's doing to your inside, your teeth, whatever else you might want to pop in there.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, cool. But you know what, we'll end there. But just as a quick takeaway, what are your advice, sort of the go-tos of how to eat, basically, how to eat, what to eat, just
it's those three things. Number 1, eat real food. Number 2, choose that real food for the nutrients it provides, and that's your meat, fish, eggs, dairy, and green things. And number 3, eat a maximum of 3 times a day. If you don't like breakfast, don't force yourself. If you don't like lunch because you have a really good brunch and you make it through to dinner, then that's fine. But just don't eat all the time. It's not good for weight. It's also not good for diabetes, because I do think type 2 diabetes is the body just saying, look, enough is enough. There's only so many times I can get sugar out of the bloodstream. I'm done. You know, I'm thrown in the towel.
Feeding me.
Yeah, just stop it. You think what you do every time you eat is massive. If you knew what happened every time you ate, you would respect that process, and you would respect your body a lot more, and don't do it so often.
Cool. Well, do you know what? Thank you so much. That was great. That was an hour of just talking food and dispelling so many myths, which so many people are just assume if you got them to write down what they should be eating,
Yeah,
it's a whole different ball game, isn't it? But
different to
thank
what they
you.
say. Pleasure. Thank you for
you.
having me. Lovely seeing you.